nervous, and I don't know why, because I'm sat on my own in the woods with my phone and my dog. I've had a real calling to make this video and make some subsequent videos afterwards, and like I can't get it out of my head. The last week, and the obstacles to sitting down and just filming it, let alone doing anything with them, posting them, editing them, sharing them. The resistance to doing that's been really profound. I've been absolutely convinced that why. Well, it's things like I'm gonna get laughed at. I think that's the main thing, is that if I share this stuff, I'm gonna get laughed at, and people are gonna think I'm a joke. That's the main thing, I think. Terrified. That's so palpable that it's even stopping me wanting to film it on my own with no one around. Very, very powerful. And then I've asked myself, well, what are my motivations for doing this? Am I trying to generate business? Is this just selling out? And it is a bit. It's I guess as far as putting this video out there is to help generate business for my business. But then that led me to the key thought that I had around making these videos, which is that, well, what's my business about? And what's the purpose behind the business? And the purpose is to help people, first and foremost. And so if by my business growing, I get to help people, and if making this video helps the business grow, then so be it. If that's selling out, I'm okay with it. Purpose is the thing I really want to talk about today, and it's very, very closely linked to my journey over the last 20 years. I'm 38 now. When I was 18, I started my first consultancy. It was a youth marketing agency, specialized in youth research. 18 years old, was pretty young. All my friends were still either on gap years or going to uni or something else. And within about the first 3 months of launching this consultancy, we were working with Barclays, Diageo, soon after McDonald's, Nestle, Samsung, Unilever. By the time I was 19, 20, I was guest lecturing at the University of London on BAs on entrepreneurialism, and I was talking at global innovation summits for McDonald's and paper conferences in Gothenburg. I was flown out to government conferences in Indonesia and Bali to speak at these places. And the first 5 years of my professional career was on a really steep trajectory like that. The next 10 years was a sort of steady decline. And that decline was quite dramatic by the end, at least emotionally. For me, it got quite dark by the end. But the last 5 years has been this incline, with all new foundations, and the last 5 years have been very beautiful, painful at times, but very, very beautiful. And the key thing about all of it is that the purpose that drove me when I was 18 and the subsequent years following, and the purpose that drove me over the last 5 years. And I realise now that without that clear purpose, I was always doomed to end up where I ended up. Having the purpose I have today allows for growth that I can't imagine. It's uncharted territory, and that is really, really exciting. It doesn't really matter what happens. It doesn't matter what businesses thrive and what businesses don't. It doesn't matter that I know what success looks like or doesn't look like. If I have that compass, if I have that moral compass, that purpose that is the leaping off point for everything that I do, then I know that I'm in good hands. I know that the motivations for what I'm doing are pure. I know that I'm not going to regret trying, and that's a real comfort. And the mystery, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how things are going to be in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and that for me is worth getting out of bed for in the morning. When it's all mapped out, when you know what holidays you're going on, and you know what Christmas next year looks like, and you know what the week looks like and what the Mondays look like. For me, it got quite existential. But for me now, having mystery is very, very exciting. Not knowing, but having that sat nav, if you like, having that guidance system that goes, head that way. You're not sure what you're going to find, but the destination is going to feel good, and that's very, very powerful. So, what was my purpose when I was 18? I don't blame myself for any of this. You know, at 18, I wasn't really supposed to know much better. I wanted to be successful. I wanted to be successful in advertising. I wanted to have my own consultancy. I had really good ideas. I still do have really good ideas, but I had really good ideas, and I was very, very confident. And the first company I set up was this by youth for youth agency that that was staffed entirely by young people. And it was actually interesting because it was quite easy to get meetings with clients, with prospects, because we were a novelty. We're in an agency staffed entirely by young people. We're all 16 to 25. Do you want to meet us? And people generally meet us just out of curiosity. But I was really passionate about this business. It was, I felt that young people weren't being represented. As a young person then, I felt that the way that young people were being brought into focus groups and not really being understood or listened to from a creative point of view. And I was really quite passionate about that. And but really the purpose was I wanted to make as much money as possible. I wanted to be seen as worthy. I wanted to be seen as successful. And this is because, without getting too deep, I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel successful. I didn't feel good enough. I had my own traumas, and whether this is the forum to share them or not, I had maternal abandonment issues. I had a very loving but unemotionally unavailable father who did his absolute best, as did my mother. But I had my trauma. I was unaware of my trauma. I was unaware of feelings. I was unaware of how I felt. I just didn't feel very good. And I believed that if I could make enough money, then people would see me as worthy. If I drove that car, then people would see me as worthy. If I married that woman, then people would see me as worthy. If I married that woman, then I must be lovable. If I buy the house, the car, live the life that I was told to, as a lot of us were, that then I would be happy. And the thing is I did all of that by the time I was 25. I lived in a grey area. I was married with a daughter, driving an Audi. Life was, I'd done it all. I had my own company. We were turning over a couple of million at the time. I had done it, and yet I was still deeply unhappy. I didn't know this, but it was the reality. I then spent the subsequent 10 years pursuing more money by whatever means I could. So my purpose then, to get to the point, was that I was pursuing money. I was doing everything for money. But no matter how much money I made or spent, I would get less and less happy. And it culminated 5, 6 years ago by closing a deal and the realization that this quite big deal did not make me in any way happy, brought me right to my knees. And I realized at that point that that everything had to change, because everything, my best attempt at life, with all of the successes in the world, with the house and the car and the wife and the kids and the holidays and the clothes and the money and all of the glamorous lifestyle that I lived, that it all, my best attempt at living life had failed dramatically because I was deeply, deeply unhappy. So I realized that everything had to change at that point. So effectively, what I'd done is that I'd made money my higher power. That was the thing, that if I could just make enough of that, that then I would be happy. And in doing so, every other aspect of my life was molded around that. My relationships with people were transactional. My relationship with work was transactional. My self-worth was transactional. If I had money, I felt good. If I didn't, then I felt bad. If I could afford something, then I must be worthy. But the second I couldn't, I must be a piece of shit, quite frankly. And so this had woven itself really, really deep. And I decided to leave the job that I was at, and I went to university. My first gut reaction was, I'll become a history teacher. maybe that would make me happy. Maybe that this, because I realized that this pursuit of money had failed drastically. The pursuit of money to be happy had failed drastically. So I was like, okay, I'll shun it all, you know, in an almost monastic fashion, and I'll become a history teacher. I didn't have a degree because I started my company when I was 18. So I decided to go to university and study history. It took me about 6 weeks to realize I didn't want to be a history teacher. But doing this degree, which ended up being a degree in the history of India, China, and Japan, was just the most beautiful, illuminating thing I've ever done. I love history for a start. It was the first time I'd made a decision as an adult to do something purely because, for the love of it, because I enjoy it. I didn't quite realize that's what I was doing at the time, but it is what happened. I chose a thing just for the love of doing it. And studying it and identifying with it and just finding joy in something that was actually costing me money effectively, rather than something that was giving me money, was a profound shift. And over those 3 years, I got to delve deep into various other cultures, and I got to do modules in Taoism and Buddhism and Zen Buddhism, and I got to do modules in history of Japanese art, and it was just this beautiful, illuminating thing. And I got to identify with these things. I got to feel that my purpose was more aligned to this subject matter that brought me joy. But then when the degree finished and I was faced with the reality of who am I now, when I was faced with the reality that I can no longer hide behind being a student of history, I was left feeling very naked, because I didn't identify, I didn't know who I was, really. I'd been this guy for 15, 16 years in the advertising industry, and then I've been this student. And then now what? And this is again where that rediscovery of purpose is so profound, because I had to go very, very deep. And I don't want to make too drastic a leap here, purpose that presented itself was to love and be loved, to be able to give and receive love. Not romantically necessarily, but to be able to just more of what the Greeks call agape, sort of unconditional, fraternal love for all people. It sounds esoteric, but the thing is that I spent my whole life not loving myself. Not necessarily being aware of this, but fundamentally not loving myself, not liking myself, low self-esteem. So the concept that now I can love and receive love, because the only way to be able to love is from a place of loving oneself. I've learned this, perhaps let's save this for another video, but this is the feeling, that's my moral compass. If I do things from a place of wanting to love and be loved, I know I can't go too far wrong, if at all. If that's my motivation in everything I do, having that purpose and then looking outside of me, using that as the lens in which to make decisions on what I want to do, was the game changer. It's resulted in an upcoming relaunch of my legacy business. It resulted in the launch of a completely new consultancy, which is being received incredibly well. And it's guiding me to do all sorts of other things, whether it be mentorship, whether it be other entrepreneurial ideas I have, working with other people in other fields that I never thought I would. But then also how it's impacted the rest of my life, my relationship with my children, my relationship with my ex-wife, my relationship with my girlfriend, my relationship with my parents, my relationship with my friends. Having that individual purpose of to love and be loved has given me that compass in which to step out into the world from. And I know that when I do, things will probably be okay. Sometimes I'm convinced that they absolutely will be okay, no matter what I'm going through at the time. So I think if I was to try and summarize this session, it would be that my learnings around purpose, my learnings around love, and how that unfolds in my day-to-day life, in my interactions with other human beings, my interactions with myself, I've realized how absolutely critical the need to be implementing these very human qualities into our day-to-day lives, but into business. There are thousands of coaches out there. There are thousands of executive leadership coaches and various different mental health and well-being facilities that are incorporating themselves into business. I suppose for me, my main focus is that these human qualities as process need to be implemented from the bottom up throughout business. This isn't about just the individual's journey and the individual's change. This is what happens when a business behaves with honesty, with trust, with empathy, with love. And why can't a business do that? Because of profit, because that profit doesn't align to this level of human spirit, because shareholder return and capitalism doesn't align to this level of, well, capitalism can't be loving, shareholder return can't come from a place of loving. It absolutely can. The concept of greed has got in the way. The concept of profit above all else has got in the way. But what we're seeing, the evidence is very much in on this now, is that the objective of growth and shareholder return and profitability can absolutely come from a place of of spirituality, not religion, just a place of good intention. I guess spirituality is quite a divisive word. A place of well being, a place of good intention. There is absolutely no reason why corporate objectives and human purpose cannot be dovetailed and aligned. And that's what we are here to do.